Hey guys, welcome to Codex Wizard. In today's video, we are going to see loops in Python. There are two types of loop in Python that are for loop and while loop. There is also nested loop, but we are going to see nested loop in last. Firstly, we are going to talk about for loops, then while loop. So, what are loops in Python? Loops are used to repeat a block of code multiple times. They help to automate or repetitive tasks. So consider you want to print a name 100 times. So you can't write print a statement 100 times. So for that reason, we use for loops so we can do the same task repetitive. Here you can see I've given a definition where an object that can return its member one at a time. Examples, list, tuples, strings, and ranges. So let's first see the types of loop, and I'm going to tell you about for loop first. So here you can see how the syntax of for loop can be written. So here is an example number one. You can see I have given a variable name string, and in that variable I have given a string name hello. So I am going to use for loop in that string and see how it's going to work. You can see I have how the for loop worked here. For I in a string, in the I we will get every character of the string hello, and when I'm going to print my I in the output below, you can see how each character HELL and O have been printed in our terminal. So here is example number two. So in this example, you can see our code is the same, but while printing my I've written this AND operator. So how this AND operator works? So I've written there AND operator to stop print function to print in different lines. So in our previous example, in example number one, you can see how each character of the string hello is printed in different lines. So if you want to print your string in one line and not in different lines, you can use AND operator to do that while using loop. So in previous examples, we see how for loop work for a string. So in example number three, I'm going to show you how for loop work for a list. Okay, so here I've written my list, and you can write anything in a list. And when I'm going to use for loop in my list for I in list, and when I'm going to write my print statement print I in the output below, you can see. Now observe how each string and integer in the list is printed on a separate line when I use a for loop on a list. You can see the difference when I used for loop on a string, and you can now see the difference when I use for loop in my list objects. Now let's see how range works in for loop. So here I have written a syntax for an example for I in range 5, and I have written my print statement. In below, I have written some points. Let's read these points. So range round bracket 5 generates numbers from 0 to 4. I takes each value in the range. So in my range, I have given 5. So it will generate numbers from 0 to 4. So if you want to print ranges of numbers from 0 to 5, you have to write 6 in your range, or you can also write 5 plus 1. So it could generate numbers from 0 to 5. And I takes each value in the range means in I operator we are going to get our numbers means 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So print I executes for each value. The fundamental concept of range function is that if you want to generate values from 0 to 9, you should specify 10 as the endpoint. That's the same thing I've told you about. So let's see case number one. So I have divided the range function in three cases so you can have a better understanding of this range function. Let's see the case number one. So in case number one is simple. Here I have written for I in range 10 and I have executed my print statement. As you can see, it has printed the numbers from 0 to 9 in the output below. So that was our first case about range function. Let's see case number two. To write a starting point and end point for range. So for range function, you can also give your starting point where you want to start your range from and your end point too. So as to where you want to end your range. So in this example, you can see for I in range 2 comma 11. So our starting point is 2 and our end point is 11, but it will print only from 2 to 10 because it's fundamental that it's going to print one number less. It will start with 2 and end with 10. In the output, you can see how our output is printed from 2 to 10. Let's see case number 3. If we have three arguments in range function, so our case number 3 is about three arguments. So our first argument is a starting point, in the middle is our end point, means n minus 1, and our last argument is a step to jump. Step to jump means how many steps you want your range function to jump before printing the next range of your number. Here, let's see how case 3 works. So here you can see for I in range, I have given three arguments in my range function. 2 means our starting point, tens means our end point, and 2 is our point to jump. So in the output, you can see it has started from 2 and it jumped 2 times before printing 4 and then 6 and then 8. So let's see another example but in a different way. How we can print the range function in reverse order. So here you can see in my second example, I have given three arguments 10, 1 and minus 1. So in this, the 10 is our starting point where the sequence begins. 1 is the stopping value. The sequence stops before reaching 1. And minus 1 is the step value. This dictates that the range will count down by 1 in each iteration. So I hope you understood how for loop works in Python. So now let's see how while loop works in Python. So here I have written a syntax of while loop, while and condition. In while loop, it's necessary for us to give a condition because while loop doesn't work without a condition as for loop works. So here I have written a code for while loop. I is equals to 0 while I is less than 5, print I, and we are going to increment I by 1 in each iteration. So that's why I have written here I plus is equals to 1. I plus is equals to 1 simply means I is equals to I plus 1. So in the output you can see how it has printed from 0 to 4 because when our I is less than 5, our loop stops. The loop continues as long as I is less than 5. I plus is equals to 1 increments 1 I by 1 each iteration. Avoid infinite loops. Ensure the loop has a condition that eventually becomes false. So here in my code, I have given a condition which eventually becomes false, which is I less than 5. Now let's talk about nested loops. What are nested loops? A loop inside another loop. So in this code, for I in range 3 and for j in range 2. For I in range is our outer loop and for j in range is our inner loop. So you can say that I works as a rows and j works for column. So when I print my I and j, you can see how our range works for I. In my I, it has printed numbers from 0 to 2, and for my range in J, it has printed number from 0 to 1. So the explanation is the inner loop runs completely for each iteration of the outer loop. So in this example of nested loop, I want to print my hello world in Python, but I also want the character of each string in every different line. So I can use nested loop for that. Here you can see I have applied an outer loop which is for I in list, and to print each character of that string in a list, I have applied another inner loop which is for j in I, because I'm going to get my string in I. So now I'm going to apply my inner loop on I. So when I print my I and j, you can see in the output how it also prints each character of the string in different lines. So that was just our explanation. So now let's solve some practice question for loops in Python so that you can have a better understanding and you can now code in loops in Python. So now let's solve these questions. So the first question is write a Python program to find the factorial of a number. I'm going to take number as a user input, and now I'm going to take a variable named multiply which is equals to 1, and now I'm going to write for loop for I in range. I'm going to give the range from 1 to number plus 1, and now I'm going to write multiply by is equals to I, and now I'm going to print my I multiply and run it. It's telling me to enter a number. Here you can see the factorial of 5 is 120. Let's move on to the next question. Write a Python program to find the sum of digits in a number without recursion. Okay, so gonna take a number as a string, sum is equals to 0, and for I in number, we are going to run loop in number, and sum plus is equals to, I'm going to make every value of I into integer. Print the sum. You can see the sum of 1, 2, and 3, 4 is 10. Write a Python program to print a table. Take a number. You can take a user input for a number. Okay, so now let's apply for loop for I in range 1 comma 10 plus 1, and taking a variable as table is equals to number multiplied by I, and print the table. You can simply print the table, but I'm going to print my print statement in more detail. Enter a number, and you can see here our table is printed. So next question is print even numbers in reverse order. First, take a range as a user input. Then for I in range, whatever range you want to print your even number. So I'm going to write 1 comma range plus 1. And then if I divided by 2 is equals to 0, then print that number. So I have done a little mistake here because even number is in reverse order. So I'm going to change my range function. Now print inter range. You can see here we have printed our even numbers. Next question is print a right angle triangle pattern. For that we are going to use nested loop. N is equals to 5, and for I in range 0 to n plus 1. For j in range I, and now in print statement give a static, and now write the AND operator, this print line, and now run the code. You can see we have successfully printed our pattern. Next question, we are again going to print another pattern. Let's see what's gonna be this pattern about. Okay, so here we are also going to use nested loop, and if statement too. And else. Okay, so I have forgot to write my j range. I'm gonna write that for j in range n. Okay, let's run this. You can see our pattern is printed here. Again print numbers, but this time using while loops. First take number from user input, then take a variable name I, then write a condition for while loop. It's necessary to write a condition in while loop. If I is less than is equals to number, then write print statement where print numbers from 1 to numbers that you are going to take as a user input. Then increment the I. Let's run the code. Here a number. The code has worked. Next question is write a program that checks whether a given number is prime or not using while loop. So I've taken a number as user input, then I have written my if statement. Now I'm going to write else statement for the number. Now write the condition for while loop. If I multiply by I is less than is equals to number, again an if statement. Now I'm gonna print if a number is prime, print the number, write an else statement. If a number is not prime, let's run and enter a number is 17, which is a prime number, 18, which is not a prime number. Next question is write a program to count number of vowels in a string using while loop. Let's take a string, hello world. You can take any string, or you can also take a user input. Let's make a list of vowels so we can check a variable name I and condition for a while loop, which is if I is less than is equals to length of a string. Let's use a for loop for character in a string. If character in vowels, then I'm going to count. So take a count variable, increment that count variable, and now I'm going to print my count variable. Let's run the code. You can see 3 vowels are here in the string. So thanks for following along with this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful and that you are now more confident with loops in Python. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Feel free to drop a comment below and I will do my best to help out. Happy coding, and I will see you in the next video.